welcome to RAMJB's Fighter Combat School. Today, in lesson 5, we're going to see a little bit about plane vectors, different types of pursuits, and why do you want to change a plane of attack. There are several reasons for this, because in lesson 4 you saw some basic ACM, and to move on to more complicated ones we need to understand the basics of why they work. So let's start with the vectors. So you can see plane in a given moment and a given time has a lot of different vectors, which could be like the drag vector, lift vector, and velocity vector, gravity vector. Well, the ones that are important for ACM to take in consideration are the lift vector and the velocity vector. As you can see, the lift vector is pointed directly upwards from your plane. It's in a 90-degree angle with your plane pointed upwards. And the velocity vector is just the vector towards the point you are flying to. Usually this is roughly the same as where your nose is pointed at, but at high angles of attack the velocity vector doesn't really match the nose of the plane. When you are, for instance, when you are landing, flaring out, your velocity vector is pointed much lower than the nose of the plane. Actually, the velocity vector and the axis vector of the plane, the angle between those is what we saw in other lessons, that is the angle of attack. So those are the two vectors we are going to basically see a lot in ACM, and we are going to use for understanding different type of pursuits. And those are important for energy management, energy fighting, and advanced combat maneuvers. As you can see, there are three different types of pursuits: lead pursuit, pure pursuit, and lag pursuit. Each one of them defines a lot of things, starting from how your closure rate to the enemy is going to be, which is going to be your angle towards him when you are in gun's range, and how fast or how slow you close onto him. We are going to explain each one of them in detail, but as a rough estimation, lead pursuit is achieved pointing your velocity vector in front of the enemy intended path of motion. So you are basically pointing your plane in front of the enemy. Pure pursuit is when you are pointed directly at the enemy fighter or plane, can be a bomber. In this, your velocity vector is pointed all the time towards the enemy plane. And finally, the lag pursuit implies that your vector, speed vector, is pointed somewhere behind the enemy intended path of motion. As for the difference between the three, well, we are going to see them in more detail now. Let's start with the lag pursuit. This is a lag pursuit. In the lag pursuit, what you do is to put the velocity vector behind the enemy plane. Why do you want to put your velocity vector behind an enemy plane? Well, for several reasons. First of all, you might be unable to outturn him in a given moment, and you simply are keeping your place and keeping your point behind him, waiting for a moment when you can actually win a firing shot. There are more reasons why do you want to keep a lag pursuit. If you are coming very fast towards an enemy and he's very slow, usually that means that the closure rates are going to be very high. He's going slow, you're going fast, and the difference of speed is very high. So the time you have to achieve a gun pass is going to be very slow. With a lag pursuit, what you are going to do is to set yourself behind the enemy plane and win more. Well, first of all, you are going to lag a bit. You are going to delay your closure a little bit. Maybe you want to wait him to finish a maneuver. Maybe you want to just attack him just a little bit later than what you would do with any other of the pursuits. Also, it's a very energetic, conservative maneuver. Think of it and look into the picture. As you can see, the plane in front, which is avoiding the defensive one, is turning very hard. If you turn with him, you are actually turning in a same or larger circle, which means you are pulling the same or less G's than him, which also means that you tend to keep a lot of energy up. If you try to follow exactly his motion in a pure pursuit, you are pulling more G's than what he's doing. So you are bleeding energy faster than what he's doing. And if you try to cut inside his turn, you are pulling lead pursuit and you are pulling a lot more G's than what he's doing. So you are wasting a lot of extra energy than what he's doing. So it's a very common theme to see boom and zoom plane pilots all the time lead pursuing the enemy instead of lag pursuing, and that's bad because if you put your nose all the time towards the inside of the enemy turning circle, you are burning a lot of energy compared with what he's doing, and as such you are wasting a lot of energy, and in a boom and zoom plane you simply can't do that. So let's move on to the pure pursuit. Here it is. In a pure pursuit, what you are doing is pointing your nose and your velocity vector directly towards the enemy plane at all the moments. So basically what you are trying to aim is to follow exactly where he is. This demands a constant turning and pointing your nose towards him. With this kind of turn, what you achieve is to establish yourself exactly behind the enemy plane in a very narrow angle towards his tail. It's a very good maneuver to pull to achieve a perfect 6 position in the less time possible. With the lag pursuit, you are going to achieve it as well, but in a longer time. With this, you are going to achieve it in the shortest time possible because you are following exactly his position, and in the end what you are going to do is to be just behind him and pointing at him. So this is usually a move to be used and kind of pursuit used to win a perfect 6 position on an enemy plane. Of course, if the enemy plane is turning, as I said before, you are going to blow a lot of energy compared with him. So it's also a very good way to waste a lot of extra energy you don't want. Maybe you see an enemy plane and you know you have a lot of extra energy and speed and you don't want it. Why? Because maybe you are too fast. And maybe what you want to do is to stick behind the enemy and maneuver with him. Maybe you are in a better turning plane, or maybe you are in a plane that at very high speeds doesn't maneuver very well. So you want to blow a lot of speed to achieve a perfect 6 position on the enemy 6. So yeah, that's it about the lag pursuit. The third and last of the kind of pursuits is the lead pursuit. In this, what you are doing is putting your velocity vector in front of the enemy plane. So you are moving in advance of where he is going to be. This means that as you close towards him, you are going to come closer and closer and closer, but you are crossing his intended path of motion. This also means that if you keep it up, chances are that you are going to crash against him. This is one of the reasons why there are so many RAMs in arcade. Because people use lead pursuit all the time. Why? Because we have a target lead indicator and everyone tries to point his nose there to shoot. And the target point indicator is always ahead of the enemy plane towards his intended path of motion. So if you keep your plane pointing at that point all the time, eventually you are going to crash. Why do you want to pull a lead pursuit? Well, it's as easy as understanding that aerial gunnery needs a lead pursuit in order to put your cannons pointed at the enemy. because your bullets have a travel time, and in that travel time the enemy plane has moved. So in order to put your bullets at the point the plane is going to be when you want to hit him, you will have to shoot in advance, and you have to shoot ahead of him. So in order to shoot ahead of him, your nose must be pointed ahead of him as well. In other words, there is no way to kill an enemy plane without at least a little window of lead pursuing it. Of course, this comes to a cost. Again, you are burning a lot of energy. You are putting a lot of Gs compared with the enemy. The enemy may be, like in the picture, maybe flying in a straight line and not burning any energy at all, while you are, because you are turning. Maybe he's turning in a circle and you're pulling inside him. If you're pulling inside him, you're pulling more Gs than him, and he's going to catch you. There are a lot of instances where people simply don't control the closure rates. They come in too fast, and what they end up is having a very slow window of opportunity to shoot the enemy down. They don't put enough lead on him to do so, and they end up ramming the enemy. That's what happens in an arcade a lot. There's another consideration about these kind of turns, and that is that they control your approach to the enemy plane. This is not just about winning a 6, not winning a 6. This also has a lot of considerations about closure rates. Let's see it in the first diagram we saw. Sorry. So the three different kind of pursuits define also if you are going to intercept a target or not, and how you are going to intercept it. Let's say that you are in a much faster plane towards an enemy plane that's moving in a 90 degrees towards you, maybe exactly from left to right. If you point your nose in front of the enemy, what you're doing is cutting his angles. You're actually moving directly towards the place he's going to be at. So you're coming in and closing the gap the fastest you can. The problem with this is that if you are in a very fast plane and you do that, your angle when you reach that point is going to be very close to 90 degrees, and your firing window is going to be very small. So you have a very brief period of time to shoot your guns and kill the enemy. So what you want to do in a faster plane than the enemy, if you are much faster, is to point your nose behind him. Why? Because that way, by pointing in a point just behind him and adjusting as he's moving, what you're doing is using your superior energy to win a very good position. And when you actually are into guns range, you are going to be in a very much narrower angle than if you lead pursuit it. And the window of opportunity to shoot your guns is going to be much larger and much bigger. And of course, you want to have as much time to shoot the enemy down as possible. Conversely, if you are in a slower plane, or if you are moving much slower than the enemy, and he's moving in a 90 degrees angle versus you, if you point your nose behind him, you are going to achieve nothing. Why? Because basically what you're doing is being slower and also traveling a bigger distance. So in the end, the guy is going to go away. But if you cut his angles, if you use a left turn, if you put your nose towards the intended point of motion of the enemy, where he's going to be in maybe 30 seconds, what you're doing is traveling the smallest amount of distance in a given time, and you're closing much faster. You are going to intercept him at that point. What this means is that with slower planes, you can catch up faster planes. And this is one of the biggest misinterpretations I see in the forums and in the game. Oh, I can't believe it, I was in a P-47 and that Isaac caught me in a dive. Why? Because that dive wasn't a pure dive. You were pointing your nose down and then you were pulling up, and the other guy behind you was leading you. So in the end, he was traveling less distance than you, and even if he was slower, he will catch with you. Why? Because he's traveling less distance. Just think of it as a way of well, you see this in my videos a lot. I see a lot the expression I cut his angles. When I say I cut his angles is that I'm pointing my nose inside or towards where he's going to be in the future, so I'm actually traveling less distance than what he is. So even if he is faster, me being slower, I'm traveling less distance, so in the end, I catch up with him. So that's very important to remember. Lead, well, of course, that's situational as well. Maybe you are in a boom and zoom plane and you want to just slash and zoom away without further consideration because there are more bandits around or whatever, and you use a lead pursuit. But just manage the way you are pursuing the enemy to increase your chances to kill him or to catch up with him. Because if you are in a slower plane and the other guy is just doing a wide turn, if you follow directly, you are never going to catch up. If you cut inside him, you are going to catch up. So yes, those are the three different types of pursuits: lead pursuit, pure pursuit, and lag pursuit. Now let's move on to a slightly different thing. And the thing is the planes of attack. Picture this. You are directly behind an enemy and the enemy is turning better than you. And you're directly behind him, lag pursuing him because you can't turn better than him. You can't cut inside him. If he's in a better maneuvering plane, sooner or later he's going to gain an advantage on you and end up on your tail if you keep on doing exactly the same circle. However, and this is one of the reasons why the yo-yos work so well, there's gravity to think about. I mean, gravity affects the way you turn. If you point the nose under the horizon, gravity pulls your nose down and helps your turning. If you pull the nose up, gravity tends to hold you a bit back. There is also another consideration, and it's purely geometrical. If you are in the same plane of turning, the slower turning plane is always going to lose. But if the slower turning plane changes the angle of his turning, he's going out of phase with the enemy plane. He's actually turning in a completely new, different plane. And if you know a little bit of oscillation physics, you know that out of phase waves sooner or later match up. Sooner or later, if you change your plane of turning, even if the other guy is keeping his turn in the same plane and is a better turner than you, if you change your plane of attack to a different one, sooner or later you'll become in phase with him. In other words, sooner or later you are going to be in his tail. So this is a way to avoid those big stalemates that happen when two very similar turning planes are turning in the same circle. One of them just has to slightly change the plane and where he's turning, and sooner or later he'll be behind the other guy. Of course, that also works to the other side. I mean, sooner or later you are going to be in phase with him, but sooner or later he's going to be in phase with you. So just be careful about what's happening. Okay. The most extreme version of this, you can see this in the picture. There's one guy turning in a very horizontal plane. There's another guy turning in a more inclined plane, and the more extreme one is the vertical one. If you are looping around a guy who's turning, sooner or later that loop is going to coincide. Is going to be putting yourself in the point where the enemy is going, and at that point you open fire and you get him. So remember, planes of attack. Change your plane of attack. This, you see me doing this a lot in my videos. A lot. I do high yo-yos. I do low yo-yos. I go in the vertical while the guy is turning in the horizontal. This is changing the plane of attack. And also there are a lot of other considerations. Why do you want to do this? Because maybe you want to go vertical to conserve your energy while he's turning in the horizontal and wasting his. Maybe you want to go oblique instead of vertical because you don't have enough energy to pull a loop. But you want to conserve as much energy as you want. There are a lot of considerations why do you want to change a plane of fighting. But one of them is purely physical. Because sooner or later you are going to be in phase with him and you're going to kill him. It's as simple as that. And now, as a little extra, I'm going to include an ACM here. One of my favorites and one of those who define a good roller plane as a great fighter and dog fighter. And also I'm going to come with some small images of it in the game. I mean, actually you have seen the video I'm going to put up, so you'll recognize it. And the maneuver is called lag displacement roll. There you have it, the lag displacement roll. This is a maneuver to pull in any plane actually, but this is particularly effective in planes that don't turn very well and are trying to catch the cheeks of a better turning plane. Picture this: the attacker plane is roughly in a good firing situation towards the enemy, but the enemy is turning very hard, and the attacker plane is going to overshoot. Well, here you could do a high yo-yo, a low yo-yo, but there's also the chance to do a lag displacement roll. In a lag displacement roll, what you want to do is to roll opposite to the enemy intended path of motion and barrel roll in that direction, and as you are coming into the plane of the enemy, into the plane of angle of the enemy, pull down on him. So it's a complete barrel roll and then pull up. Seems a little bit counterintuitive because you are rolling opposite to the enemy intended path of motion. Actually, you're moving away from him. Let me explain why this works. If you start rolling away of the enemy and pulling a bit that way, what you're doing is winning separation. The other guy is still turning and you are turning the opposite way. But as you barrel roll, you're describing a spiral, and gravity is going to assist you pulling your nose down when you are in the top of the spiral. The other guy is still moving, is gaining separation. You are lagging him. Actually, this is a very weird version of the lag turn. You are lagging behind him. You are letting him go away. And the farther he is, the lesser the angle is going to be when you fall down on him. So when your roll is completed and your lift vector is pointed towards the enemy intended path of motion, you pull on the stick and you turn inside him, and you find yourself directly on the enemy 6, or at least in a very, very, very good firing position. This is a key and one of the most amazing things you can achieve with a boom and zoomer like the P47 or a Focus 190, a good roller boom and zoomer versus a better turning plane. But you can pull it in virtually any plane, as long, of course, as it's got a good roll. If it doesn't roll very well, and that's why I don't like bad rolling planes, to be honest. If you are in a very good rolling plane, you can pull this anytime you are going to overshoot an enemy, and you are going to end up in his 6 or at least win a gun's position all the time. And you're going to see it right now in a video. The first thing I want to do is to set up the differences between lag displacement roll and a high yo-yo. This you saw in my boomerang video, we are going to review it, and also the lag displacement roll is in that video. Here you see me going for a SU2. This is a left turn, by the way. I go up and come down on him. Nothing too fancy, this is exactly a high yo-yo, no big deal. But what you are going to see in the following is going to be a pure lag displacement roll. You see there is a Jack 7 there. And also, well, the thing is I'm in a not very, very fast moving plane. The boomerang is very slow. But this plane rolls particularly well at speeds around 200-400 kilometers per hour. It's a pretty good roller. So I see it, the Jack 7 is going down and it's going to try to kill that guy. And I mean, by no means I'm thinking right now I'm going to pull any kind of maneuver. I'm just going for him. The thing with ACM, you have to integrate them so well into you that you pull them by instinct when their situation is needed. You don't have to think, oh, I have to pull a high yo-yo, oh, I have to pull a low yo-yo. No, this is a lag displacement roll. No, you have to pull them as the situation demands. So there you see me coming in for the kill. He's offering me a very sharp angle and I'm closing in very fast and I'm going to overshoot. So I'll roll opposite to him and then towards him, come down and shoot. That's it. Let's see it again. In slow motion as well. So you can see I'm noticing I'm very fast and I'm going to overshoot and he's turning towards the left. So what I do is roll opposite to where he's going to go and roll down on him. So I go away and then come in. The thing is, you see he's turning to the left and now he's changing towards my right. If he had continued his move towards left, I would have gotten his 6 perfectly, but he turned opposite to me and I only got a snapshot, still some hits, but you see the basics of it. Let's see it once again. There I go, I'm coming fast, I see him turning very very tight towards the left, roll opposite, and do a barrel roll. Do a barrel roll! And you see, if the guy had kept his turn towards the left, I'd be in his 6. I'd be just in his 6. Instead, he rolled opposite and he gave me just a snapshot, which I took. I got some hits. And then led pursuit with a low yo-yo and I killed him. So well, that's all for today's lesson and today's Fighter Combat School session. I hope you learned something in this lesson, that you better understand now why, though a lot of rams happen in game, how to avoid them. They are very easy to avoid them. There's just letting them go. I mean, don't stick into a lead pursuit until the end, because you are going to crash versus the enemy. At the end, just let it go. Also, I hope you learn how to cut corners in a slower plane versus a faster plane. I hope you understood the energetic differences between all the 3 different pursuits. How some of them are more conservative than others. And this is very important because also, I mean, what you are seeing here are tutorials and Fighter Combat School lessons for arcade. But when you move on, because you will, sooner or later you will, move on to historical battles, where there's no target lead indicator, you are going to find yourself wanting to lag turn the enemy a lot more than what you do in arcade, because you don't have a lead turn indicator and you are waiting for the proper moment to open fire. And at that moment you change your lag pursuit to a lead pursuit and fire. Why? Because it's going to keep your energy up, and in historical battles that's super important. And also because it's much easier to keep stationed behind an enemy lag pursuing him than lead pursuing him. Also, I hope you understand a little bit more about changing planes of fighting. Just if you are not winning a turning conquest in the same plane, just change the plane, because sooner or later you are going to end up in the enemy 6. And also, I hope you learn something with one of my favorite ACMs, the lag displacement roll. So that's all for now. I hope you enjoyed. If you liked it, give me a thumbs up. If you want to see more of this coming, please subscribe if you haven't done so. And well, if you want to ask whatever you want to ask, or tell me whatever you want to tell me in the comment section below. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and see you later.